What happens when you're preparing for birth while carrying far more than the weight of pregnancy? When your family is spread across the country, your husband's health is in crisis, and every plan you've made seems to be unraveling. Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to episode 335 of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and today I'm joined by Tricia, a mother of seven whose journey into her seventh birth came during one of the most challenging seasons her family has ever faced. As her husband's health declined and their family became separated across multiple states, Tricia found herself learning a lesson that would carry her through both life and birth. Trust harder. Let's jump in. Please remember that the opinions of my guests may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Tricia, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you, and you are a wealth of knowledge. Being a 7-time home birther, there's going to be so much for us to talk about in this podcast episode. Would you mind just starting by introducing yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, my name's Tricia, and my husband and we've lived in a small town in northern Idaho for going on 14, 15 years. And we have, 7 kiddos. Actually, this is actually only my 5th home birth. We tried my first, when we got pregnant with my first, we were planning home birth. And so that is, I feel like each birth is a story in and of itself. But I was sold on home birth from the beginning, loved it. My husband was like, just didn't know anything about it. He was from like a larger city. It just kind of was like not on his radar at all. So we interviewed a local midwife, and she was actually about to move. So she recommended us to someone that had trained under her, but really just put us at ease, was able to answer all of our questions, answer all my husband's questions. And so we were both like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like, why would we go to the hospital if this is like a normal, natural process? We're healthy. And so we tried for a home birth with my first. Ended up transferring, which was great. My midwife, one of the things I love about her is that she's not going to, like, if she feels like there might be a problem, like, or a complication that would put me in danger or the baby in danger, she's like, we're heading to the hospital. So it was actually really thankful because she was sunny side up for my first. I was just a lot of hard back labor, 2 hours of really hard pushing. The nurses there were actually amazing, and they were more like doulas for me. So my midwife doulaed me. The nurses were acting more like doulas. And then, so I thought, well, I obviously need like a team of people to have a baby. That's what I felt like coming out of it. So their second, we decided just to go with the hospital. I still used my midwife as a doula. I had fetal ejection reflex with him. He just kind of flew out. So I was like, oh, maybe I don't need to be in the hospital to have babies. So
I love that.
And then going into my third, I was really confident. I mean, my first went great. My second one was also amazing. And then first home birth, I was really excited to try doing this at home. My husband is a construction contractor, and so we were flipping houses at the time. So we were like living in a construction zone. It was kind of just a fun, like, I love living in it, but it is like a level of chaos that you kind of have to like get used to. And ended up having my third after a lot of prodromal labor, which I had not had at all with my first two. Ended up taking castor oil, got his labor induced, and then it was just like so fast. I like could not even like wrap my mind around what was happening. Ended up having him in the bathtub, felt like I was going to break in half because I was just like claustrophobic. It was really, like, looking back now, I can really laugh about it, but that was the first time I felt like, oh my goodness, I feel like I've gone through something that I really need to process. And I don't know if it wasn't that I don't know if I could do this again, but like then going into my fourth, I was like all of a sudden like really afraid, which fear hadn't really come into the picture before that point. And so with my fourth, I remember my midwife telling me, like, you can push, you're ready, like anytime, and I just remember being afraid, not wanting to, because I hadn't really like processed through that fear from my third one. And ended up, obviously pushing the baby out. It was great. Everything went wonderfully. And a dear friend afterward came over, and she has 6 children of her own. I was talking to her about this and about this fear, and she relate to me, just something she realized when she was having her babies, and very encouraging to me, and something I've kind of held on to going into all the others, is that when you're going into labor, that like God made us women to have a huge capacity to handle pain, like a
Mm.
huge capacity to handle things that we feel like we can't handle. So the pain, she's like, Trish, the pain will not destroy you. And you have to know that. Like, God made you to endure this. But what will destroy you is the fear of the pain. And that is from the enemy. So, like, the pain itself, you ask God at the beginning to walk through with you with every contraction. And he'll be there with you, carrying you through it. You don't have to just wait till that crisis moment when you're like, I can't do this anymore, this hurts too much, you know, Lord help me. But he really will walk through the whole thing with you. And so just holding on to that and realizing like, oh, I really can banish this fear and say, like, this fear isn't welcome in this room,
Mhm.
and keep moving forward. So then my fifth and sixth, they were at home. They were a lot more peaceful and just really great. I remember my fifth, it was the middle of a snowstorm. There was no power out. We lived out in the country at the time. It was a snowstorm, no power. We had like a fire going and no heater. So my midwife and the friends I had were like all in like big down coats and around, and I had, they're boiling water on the stove to warm up the birthing pool and everything. And then my fifth was 4th of July. So it was like fireworks and everything when he was being born. So it's just, each birth is so different, and they
Mhm.
all are so unique. It's just really fun. And then after my sixth was born, our life kind of just like got flipped upside down. So my husband, construction contractor, soccer player, rock climber, really active in our church, a deacon in our church, head of security team. Like, he just does all the things and does them, really well, really amazing guy. And all of a sudden we just noticed month after month, he just couldn't, like, he couldn't keep the plates all spinning like he
Mm.
used to. And he just started slowing down. Things got harder and harder until finally he just like couldn't get out of bed anymore. I remember hitting a point where I thought, I'm going to need to, like, I think you might be dying. Like, because he couldn't, insomnia came into the picture. So he wasn't sleeping, but he couldn't get out of bed. He like started slurring his speech, like all kinds of really scary things that were like, what is going on? So that started a cascade of events where he first got diagnosed with, doctors like, well, this sounds like, like ADHD. You just can't like get out, get up, get going, like, here's some Adderall. That was kind of before the full crash. And that kind of like just totally depleted him. And
Mhm.
then ended up, in bed. And then he's like, oh, well, you actually have Hashimoto's. So your thyroid, your body's attacking your thyroid. So here, get on this medication. You're going to feel better and like start feeling better in like 6 weeks. And it was just worse from there. So we
Oh.
ended up having to pack everybody up, loaded everybody up into Suburban, and moved across the country to live with my parents in Florida. So we were all there. That was really hard. That was kind of where we have a mantra, a life mantra that's been going through this season with us, of just like trust harder, because we kept trying harder. We kept trying to get, my husband to get better. We did all kinds of, different things, and we kept trying to make life work in Idaho, and nothing's working. So we packed everybody up and we're like, okay, Lord, we just have to trust you with all of this. And so I was running our company, our business, from a distance, and trying to keep that going. It was a sweet time though, of being just like, my kids especially getting to know my parents really well, and we have cousins close by and great grandparents, kind of all in that same kind of like area within like walking.
Wow.
So that's a really sweet situation. And so this was our first time where we were like, this might not be the best time to have a baby. Might not be the best time to get pregnant. At that point, we didn't really know what was going on. Our doctor, our family doctor here, basically was just like, this is out of my depth now. Like, I don't know what to do to help you. Like, I really want you to go to the Mayo Clinic and see what's going on. So we took 2 weeks, went up there. We're super thankful to rule out things like, cancer and all, death sentence kind of things. Ended up with a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and then severe depression and generalized anxiety disorder, which, if you know my husband, it's just like, that does not fit at all. So,
Mhm.
but they were able to give us some medications that helped. And then we were kind of like, okay, now let's jump in the deep end of all of these conditions and figure out, how do we solve this? Went back to Florida, found out that we were few months later found out we were pregnant, which was we were like, okay, Lord, as another, all right, Lord, here we go. Like, trust harder. So this was, I think, because of the exhaustion of just having to run so many aspects of life, kind of as a single mom, where
Yeah.
I hadn't ever had to do that before. The morning sickness was a lot harder. So I was a lot more sick with this pregnancy, but it was sweet being in my parents' home because it'd be like, I'm like, cooking dinner and I have to go throw up and then come back and my dad just like kind of pats me on the hand and is like, you go to bed. I got this. Like, I'll finish. I'll got this. I'll take the kids. So it was really sweet to have that like extra support. It was a much rougher first trimester for me. Yeah, and then otherwise pregnancy, it just went really smoothly. So after the morning sickness cleared up, I felt amazing. My energy was back. I've had quite a journey with varicose veins. So I had a couple surgeries after my sixth that really helped with those, and more just the pain. So I was the most pain-free I'd ever been in a pregnancy. So that was a huge mercy. Got through was in my second trimester. We all went to Texas to visit my in-laws for Christmas. So we were there, and there was a cascade of events that again flipped our lives just upside down on its head. So we got there. I think the day after we got there, my father-in-law came down with influenza. And so then influenza just went through the whole family, except for my sister-in-law. And she was just a dear and an angel and just took care of all of us, fed us all broth and tea and just, nursed us all back to health. So that was happening through Christmas. The day after Christmas, I got an email from someone that I had hired to try to help run our company up here. So I own a roofing company. So to try to run things up in Idaho, because I was struggling to really keep it going well, like 3,000 miles away, or from Idaho to Florida. It's hard to sell someone a roof when they're like when you're that far away. So he was supposed to do that. Well, he decided he needed to go a different direction. Life was taking them in a different direction. So I got this letter a day after Christmas, hey, I'm not going to be working for you anymore, which is leading into the time where like, well, I need to run that. Like, I need sales, I need to run this. So I talked to my husband. I was like, I think I have to go back to Idaho, like, to provide, for our family. And where I'm going to take all the kids, like, you're going to stay here. He had been seeing some health improvements just with the climate in a dry desert climate versus being in kind of like wet, humid Florida. So we're like, well, like, okay, I'll leave you here. I'll take all the kids. We'll go back to Idaho. We're going to like figure this out. And he was like, that is a really dumb idea, Trish. You're huge pregnant. Like, you cannot take 6 children by yourself to Idaho. Like, what happens when you get the flu in Idaho and there's like, there's nobody there and you have 6 little people, that you have to take care of. And I was like, yeah, you're right. He's like, so this is what we're going to do. Our bigger kids were really well established in a school in Florida with my parents. They loved it. They were thriving, a small like Christian school co-op down there. And he's like, we're going to send the 3 bigs back for the semester to live with my parents. You take the 3 littles and go back to Idaho and live with friends, so you have some support, and then I'll stay in Texas. So we all split up. We had our anniversary January 4th, and then I think on January 7th, I flew back to Idaho. And it's been amazing how the Lord just has provided every step of the way. So everything from, housing to schooling for my little guys. I had a preschooler and a first grader when we came back up, and my 2-year-old. Friends who just surrounded us and have just been pouring out like just so many blessings that I cannot even begin to thank people, for the amount that they have just poured out for us. Watching my kids so that I can work, housing us, feeding us, clothing us, like all the things. It's just been amazing. And so we just spent the rest of the pregnancy just all kind of split up. And that was something that was really hard, and trials always are. That's one thing my husband has been really amazing about, just kind of leading our family through this trial, of just remembering that like trials are supposed to be hard. Yes, through trials, but the growth and refinement and the gold that comes out on the other side, like, we would never trade it, for just getting to skip out on the hard. And I feel like that's the same with birth. You know, it's so hard. And there are moments, especially in it, that are just so hard. And so, you know, everyone's experience is different, but there can be times where it's so painful. It's so hard. You feel like you can't do it. But then you get to the other side and you're like, I would do it 100 times again. Like, this is so worth it. And I wouldn't trade it. Yeah, and there were a few scriptures that I just like clung to through this pregnancy. And Isaiah, I don't know if I feel like the Psalms are such a good one for suffering, but I hadn't realized what a wealth like Isaiah is. And towards the end of my pregnancy is Isaiah 50, verse 7, which I really love actually in the King James Version. And it says, "For the Lord God will help me. Therefore shall I not be confounded. Therefore have I set my face like a flint, and I know that I shall not be ashamed." And just realizing going into, it's like, okay, I'm going into this birth, and I know that my husband's probably not going to be here with me. But I know that the Lord is with me. And through all of this trial, that is what he's been showing us again and again. And especially for me, just stripping away a lot of my entitlements, like my entitlement to my own home, my entitlement to having my kids with me, my entitlement to my husband, like all of these things that I felt like I needed. And the Lord's like, no, like you need me. And so going into this birth, it was just that really that conviction of like, no, I am your strength and you need me and I will be with you. And really trusting him going into that. And it was just a sweet mercy. Like one of the hugest mercies was just getting to be back with my midwife. And so I was super thankful. The midwife scene down in Florida where my parents live was a little bit different. And I did eventually find a midwife who I was very comfortable with, and we jived, and she was great. And so I was excited about having a home birth with her. But I remember when I got pregnant in Florida, I texted my midwife and I was like, "Can I fly you down? Like, would you come to Florida, please, and come be here?" And she couldn't. So it was just another one of those, like, the Lord being like, "Nope, you don't need Sue. You don't need Annie. Annie's one of my dear friends and is her assistant." And so, as acts a lot like a doula as well for me through the births. But the Lord brought us back, and so I was like, "Oh, Sue and Annie, like I can, you know, they get to be with me," and that was a huge mercy. And so that kind of brings us to the point of having this baby,
Yes.
a journey. And, but like I said, I wouldn't trade it. Yeah. So,
Getting established, you're working on the business that you guys have. You've got your 3 little ones.
mhm.
How many months was that? Because you said it was from Christmas, and then this baby was born in May, is that right?
Yes, in May. So 4.5-ish months. So we flew up January 7th, February, March, April, May. So 4-ish. Yeah, about 4 months that we were all scattered. Yep.
Wow. Gosh. And
hmm
then, okay. And so you said you felt pretty confident that your husband wasn't going to be there when you actually gave birth. What was the
Yeah.
plan in terms of how that was all going to look?
So essentially, we were living with friends for the first 3 months, or 3 months and a bit. And then after that, we had the opportunity to move over into a duplex so to kind of establish kind of like, I had been wanting like our kind of our own space, especially before baby, just to do some nesting and like someone else. You know, it's one thing to have a home birth and like, you know, your family is, you know, maybe there. But then to be in someone else's home to have a birth, which is, you know, it was just like, I don't know if I want to have a baby in someone else's house or be even just freshly postpartum and have, you know, that just feels like you're just then being like quite the imposition. So and they, although they would have graciously, like they would have been super gracious about that. They're amazing friends. But we were able to set up, and I knew just the way that chronic fatigue syndrome works. I knew I couldn't have a baby and be like, go through labor and then be really freshly postpartum and not be able to function much. And if my husband was there and like had a crash and like had like a down week where it's like, I need to be a caregiver. It's like, I can't, we both knew like I can't do both. I can't
Mhm.
care for a newborn, take care of myself, and be a caregiver for my husband. And especially on those days where he's really down, it's not like he can't, you know, like he can do the basic life things that he needs to do, but even just like making sure that meds are taken care of and like, you know, just like all those practical things. So we had pretty much decided like it's not a good idea for him to be at the birth. So I knew that that was probably what was going to happen. So my grandmother flew up May 1st, which
Oh.
is so sweet. And if everyone's like, your grandmother, so, you know, she's welcoming, I think I want to say this is her 22nd great grandbaby. And so she flew up, and she's amazing. She is still the one, she can take all of my 6 of my other kiddos and have them spend the night. And she's literally out there jogging after the 2-year-old, chasing him around the yard, and just so much energy. It's like life goals. Like, I hope
Yes.
that I'm the great grandmother like that. So she came up to kind of help, especially with the other children, to like help with them, help, with meals. And so she came up, and which is amazing. So we just walked a ton. I again had a bunch of prodromal labor with this baby. I remember telling, when I got back up here, I telling my midwife, I was like, oh, I always come like at my due date, like within a couple of days to my due date. So like, this baby's due May 11th. I'm, you know, we're we're good. And she like looked back through her chart, and she was like, you were 2 weeks early with your last one. And I was like, oh, was I did not remember that. And so then all of a sudden I was like, oh, maybe like this might be an April baby. I like hadn't wrapped my mind around that at all. I was like, we're just gonna, in my mind I was like, we're just getting to May 11th and then I'll have the baby. I think around May 4th, 3rd or 4th, I started having some pretty intense prodromal labor. Definitely harder than Braxton Hicks contractions. And they would be like 45 seconds to like a minute and a half long contractions, usually starting afternoon or evening. They would start. And they were intense, but they never like increased in intensity. So I was just like, okay, this is prodromal labor. Like, it was exhausting, but we were, getting through it. And so I finally, because I told myself at the beginning of this pregnancy, I really didn't want to do the castor oil again or any kind of like interventions to get things going. I was like, baby comes when baby comes, like, we'll just do this. But by the day 3 of that like intense prodromal labor, I was so tired. And so I texted my midwife, and she's like, well, if, let me know if you want like a midwife's brew, I'll come, get you what you need for it. And so that 3rd day, I was like, okay, my 7-year-old had rugby practice at like 4 in the afternoon. So my grandmother took him and the other kids, they went to rugby practice. I took the midwife's brew, which is the first time I'd done it in like the brew, the mix. I had done it a couple other times and just taken the castor oil, and that made me so sick. And so I think that was the thing. I was like, I don't want to do that again. That was not a fun experience. But it definitely kicked labor into gear. So she texted me and checked in, and I sent her a screenshot of, my contractions, and they were all like a minute long, and they were going down from like 5 minutes apart to 3 minutes apart. So, but I was feeling like still really good. And so I was like super happy. I was having to vocalize a little bit through the contractions. I was like, I think this is going to be a while. Like this doesn't feel that crazy. But I just remember when I was looking back through my text thread with her, she was like, I had sent her the screenshot of the contractions, and she was like, I'm on my way. And I was like, no. Like, this is going to be hours. Like, I'm still super happy between contractions. I don't think like you need to come. And she showed up at my door with all her stuff. And my friend had already come over and like was helping, set up the pool and everything. And she was like, no, like, this is like, I don't think this is going to be very long. Like, I think you need us to go ahead and be here. And I was super glad, because it ended up getting intense where I had to vocalize through them, but they kind of stalled out in intensity. So I, being like 3-ish minutes apart, a minute long contractions, but they weren't getting harder like I expected them to. And so my midwife offered, she's like, well, I could check you and, do a sweep and see, kind of how things are going. And I really didn't want to do that. But at that point I was just tired, and I was like, okay, you could do that. I know some people can go through, have their membrane swept, and it doesn't bother them that much, but it's like one of the most uncomfortable things. I like do not enjoy it at all. It's not something I like to do, but did the mile circuit, and then the intensity started picking up. We're filling the pool for me. And this labor, it was so interesting. It was so different than any of my others, and more just as like how I was laboring. So with all the ones that I was able to have a water birth, so all my home births, I really loved being in the water. And I loved the relief it gave me, and it really helped with the pain. And this one was totally different. So I remember getting a lot of relief sitting on the toilet, which I had done that before, and I tried that before in other pregnancies and that or in other births. And that was like, I was like, get me out of here. Like, I could not get off the toilet fast enough. It was like too much. This time it was really relieving, and I felt like very productive, and also standing, which I had never enjoyed standing during labor either. So that was new. And then my midwife said, okay, you don't have enough hot water to have a shower and to fill the pool. So you have to pick, like, do you want to get in the shower or do you want to get in the pool? And I chose the pool because every other birth I had loved being in the pool. And then I got in the pool and realized I made the wrong decision. so,
No.
so I still stayed in there and I labored. But the contractions were so painful. This is my seventh baby. So I was like, I felt like going into this birth, it wasn't something I hadn't really prepped for, particularly like, okay, I need to like really be ready for the pain, because it's like, I know what this pain is. I've done this, enough times. I'm not particularly worried about that. But this was for me off the charts painful contractions where I felt like I couldn't handle them. And it was my first time, I was talking to my husband about this yesterday, that my very first time in a birth where I thought, if someone offered me like an epidural right now, like if someone offered me to like just take this pain away, I would be like, do it to me. Like, please do whatever you need to. Stick a giant needle in my back. I can't do this anymore. And that was the first time I had done that. And I was thinking about it afterwards and reflecting, like, wow, what made that like so hard? And I really think I hadn't anticipated the emotional side of my husband not being there and feeling like I'm having to do this alone, and just even just the sadness of like him missing, having to miss the birth. And he's such an emotional bulwark for me, during that process. And like they're holding my hand and encouraging me and telling me I'm doing a good job. Like having the emotional side actually influencing the physical side of it and it making it that much harder. And so that was just something, looking back, like, Lord willing, we will never be in this situation again where he's not there for what, a birth, if the Lord blesses us with more. But if he were, just realizing like, oh, I need to actually prepare for that. This might actually be just a physically harder process because of the emotion, just the emotions involved. But my sweet friend Annie, who is my midwife's assistant, she was just so amazing. I remember looking at her at one point. I think it was right around transition. I remember I usually get pretty nauseous, like right at transition. That's kind of, I know, like, okay, we're getting close over the pills. But the pain, I could handle it a little bit better. And just looking at her in between contractions, just being like, like, I miss James. Like, I wish he was here. And her just jumping in and just being like, I know, and just so encouraging, like, the Lord is with you. And I remember needing to get out of the pool. So after transition, it was just like they were so painful. I could not find a position that felt comfortable to labor in the pool. And so I got out, I got onto my bed, and I was just on my hands and knees, kind of like leaning on the bed, but it was still just like so painful. I think I tend to be more of a quiet birther. So like, I'm not a screamer. Crowning usually is like my one time where I like cry out or scream or, like have some kind of like really loud moment. But this time, those contractions, I remember it just being so painful, and just crying out to the Lord, being like, Lord, like, be with me. Like, I need you with me. And Annie was right there with me. And he was like, he's with you, like, just so encouraging, but also feeling like I was just hanging on by a thread. Like, and that was the first time I'd ever experienced that in labor, just kind of being at that, my emotional wit's end with the pain. And I remember people will offer, like, do you want a mirror, or like, do you want to reach down and feel your baby, see how, close you are, and, look in the mirror. And it's so encouraging. And I've never liked doing that. I'm like, no, that's fine. I don't need to see that. I don't need to feel that. I can feel plenty. This is fine. Like, don't want to do that. But I remember reaching down this time and trying to feel for the baby's head, and I couldn't feel anything. And so like the baby was still really high up. That was a little bit discouraging. Like, oh man, like, how long is this going to be? I don't know how I can get through this pain. And I think within just a few minutes, all of a sudden, Annie, my midwife, was out of the room. She was, just getting something ready. Annie was with me. And I remember just yelling out, like, baby's coming. And all of a sudden, it went from like not feeling the baby at all to like all of a sudden she is just coming out. And so it was a fetal ejection reflex again, which I'm super thankful for. And it was actually something I had prayed for, because it was like, yeah, if this baby just wants to come out without me having to like have hours of pushing, that would be great. I'd love that. And so, but it was so fast and so shocking that I just wasn't mentally prepared, for that moment. And so I remember yelling, baby's coming. And so Sue, just my midwife, just like, scrambles back into the room. Everyone's flurrying around trying to make sure, everything's ready. And I remember her head coming out, and then I was in a weird position. So they had to like shift my legs kind of like out of the way, because she couldn't get out. And she did great, no distress or anything. And then, it was just another contraction and she just came out with the next contraction. So the amount of relief that I felt after this birth and just joy that she was here and that it was over, it was just so relieving. And then we found out my grandmother Kate was in the room, and that was really sweet. So she came in, and I feel like we both had to get through it, because I had told her, I was like, "Oh, Momo, I'm such an easy birther. This will be fine. You could stay. You could be here." And then, of course, it's like my hardest birth, but we both got through it. And she was able to look and see we had kept her gender a surprise, so she looked and saw that she was a girl, and and it was just the most amazing feeling, when you flip over and you get that baby up on your chest and you finally see what it was all, the gift that it was all for.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the story. And she was great. She actually had a really short cord. And so I think that was why it was just like why the prodromal labor was so intense. Plus, then she just wouldn't descend quite
Mm-hmm.
how she needed to, so it wasn't a very gradual descent. It was just like all of a sudden. Um,
Yep. It's like she like oxygened up. She got oxygenated and then was like, okay, we got to go now. Like,
yeah,
let's go.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, Trisha, how was it after she was born? So,
Yeah.
in the past, obviously you have had your husband there. Like there's all of this like inbuilt care. What was
Yeah.
it like immediately postpartum?
Again, it was so sweet to just have these women. They stayed. She was born at 11:52 p.m. and they just stayed with me for a really long time to make sure, to tuck us in, obviously, doing their cleanup and everything they normally do, but having my grandmother there to really, just check in on us and care for us. It's sweet to see a community of women that can come
Mhm.
around and support, other women in childbirth too. I love that aspect. And I think childbirth is something too, and postpartum time, like all of that is like also just kind of a skill that you can build over time. So like I know if you only have like one or two kids, it might not be the same, but if you have many children, and you get to go through that experience many times, it's actually something that's like, oh, like you can actually like know what to expect and know how to prepare and know how to like go through it, where you can actually kind of, it doesn't feel like things necessarily just happen to you. You can actually like go through it a little bit more intentionally. And so just being able to rely on like these women around me that God, these friends and this family that God just brought into our lives, and to be able to like just rest and for a couple days. But then praise God, he did bring my husband back up with us on May 7th. So my birthday's May 8th. And so he actually flew up to surprise me on May 7th for my birthday, so which was just so sweet. So I cried. He was like, "Oh, I kind of expected you to cry, but I didn't really expect you to like sob." I think if I had not been postpartum, I would have sobbed as well. But it was just like so many emotions. And yeah, God just bringing everything we need just right when we need it, and even though my planning personality, I would really love it a little more lead time to like know what's going to happen. Just being able to trust him to bring what we need when we need it.
Mhm.
And it's just so faithful in that.
Wow.
So
And
yeah.
then your bigger kids, when did they come from Florida or how did that work?
Yeah, they got back May 24th. So they all drove up. My parents were so sweet and drove them across the country again, drove them up here, and they just adore her. Like,
Mm.
we are a big nickname family. Her name's Elizabeth. And so we didn't really love like Betty or Betsy, or, there's some nicknames we're just like, I don't know. And we have an Izzy already. She let my 5-year-old let me know like Izzy and Lizzie is too confusing. Like we cannot do Lizzie. So we were like, okay, well, we're not sure, what we're going to call her, but she was my smallest baby. And so the kids have started calling her Bitsy just because she's so little. And so that right now is her nickname, and they just adore her. Pretty much, I have to kind of make sure, like, nope, nope, mom gets to hold her right now, like, and because everyone just would, if I let them pass her around for all day, that's just what they would do. So
That is so sweet. Oh my goodness, Trisha. And
yeah.
I'm sure there was just so much anticipation for them too of her being born on the 5th and then them coming home on the 24th.
Yes.
Like all of this time to just be so excited to meet their little sister. Wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They've been so excited, and yeah. And I feel like the excitement hasn't like lessened now that they're here. They're just like excited about her all the time.
Oh
So
my goodness. Well,
yeah.
I'm curious to know, I know you already kind of alluded to the fact that, postpartum over time, it really is beautiful how you can learn to prepare in the way that's right for your family. And
Hmm.
but with the circumstances that are so different this time around, I'm curious to hear what's that looking like for you. Where are you guys now? Are you all together in Idaho right now, or did your husband need to go back to Texas?
Yeah, no, we're still all together, and I'm so thankful. Just, I was talking to some friends, and I was like, James came back, and I cried for like 24 hours, and then my kids came back, and I cried for another 24 hours, and then the Lord has just opened up doors. We have some other family that's moving to town, and he's gonna help me run the roofing business, and it's just God opening doors for us to be able to stay here, which is just amazing. It's like I just can't think about God's kindness and the answered prayers and answering prayers in ways that I just never would have imagined. Him bringing things together and it just working out that we can stay. So we're all together. Our apartment the duplex we're living in right now is like thrifted together because like we left, we packed a moving truck and then left. So we didn't have anything. When I came back with suitcases and my
Mhm.
three little kids. So it's been really funny. Now he probably is going to fly back to Florida and get a moving truck, and then he has stuff in Texas, so like kind of do the cross country again to try to get us all back. And but praise God, his health is up, going trending up and to the right. So
Yeah.
we discovered we're working with a nutritionist here actually, and she was able to look at his blood work and they like, oh, I think you actually have you ever heard of a condition called microclotting? I think this might be what's at the root of all of this. And that has actually proven, we think, to be the case. So she put him on aspirin and some other natural supplements for thinning blood. And within about 4 days, this is while he was still in Texas, within about 4 days, he started feeling significantly better.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and there's a lot of downstream effects from the microclotting, like autoimmune, like Hashimoto's, different things that we're dealing with that we're needing to like treat and reverse. So it's still, we're not out of the woods. It's still a long way kind of to go, but he's able to be with us, which
Wow.
we're, yeah. So going from like if he sat at the dinner table with us to try to have dinner and he would end up in bed for like 3, 5 days, just like can't function for days afterward, to now he can like, he can go play a pickup soccer game, like huge, massive improvements and not be totally out. So we're just super thankful. We're really excited about what God's going to do. I am the plan. I still want to see around the curve, like what's coming, like Lord, could I just, see what's around the bend, like, and not fall off the cliff of like panic or worry or anxiety. And the Lord just being like, do you trust me? Like,
Mhm.
I've been so faithful every step of the way. The time you think like, okay, is my husband dying? Like we having those hard conversations of like, okay, if I do die, what's your plan? Like actually having to make those plans, which is very sobering. To okay, now I'm giving you this new baby, and you don't know what the future holds, and now you're going into this birth alone. Like, do you trust me? Like, am I faithful? Am I so worthy of you trusting me? And it's yes, every time it's a resounding yes and amen. So and that's a reminder I need for myself, because every day is the sufficient for the day is its own trouble, and
Mhm.
each day is like, do you trust me? So
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
moment to moment grace right there.
Yeah.
Mm. Wow, Trisha, this is incredible. What a story of faith and just that learning to trust harder, trust
Mhm.
more, lean in more, not do more, but just truly learning to hand it all over. What an amazing story. And you're a fantastic storyteller. Just beautiful. Thank you. This was such an honor. Trisha, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you. Your podcast, I feel like each pregnancy I have to start listening to birth stories earlier and earlier. Like because I just need to mentally like get in the zone. And so your podcast has been just a wealth of encouragement to me. So, thank
What
you.
an honor. Thank you. Wow. What a beautiful conversation. There were so many moments from Trisha's story that stayed with me long after we finished recording. So here are a few that stood out. First of all, fear often creates more suffering than the thing we're afraid of. Trisha shared the wisdom that pain itself won't destroy us, but fear of pain can become its own burden. Next, birth and life ask for the same thing: trust. Whether she was facing labor, separation from her husband, uncertainty about the future, or the challenges of postpartum, the invitation remained the same: trust harder. That doesn't mean do more, it doesn't mean try harder. It means take a look at where your faith lies. Next, we aren't meant to walk difficult seasons alone. The women, the family members, the friends, and caregivers who surrounded Tricia remind us of just how powerful community can be during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And finally, God's provision doesn't always arrive on our timeline, but it often arrives exactly when it's needed and not a moment before. Only every story in the Bible confirms this, right? Like, imagine the terrifying feeling of being an Israelite, fleeing Egypt with the whole Egyptian army behind you, only to meet the shoreline. We know the sea will part for them, but can you imagine in that moment how uncertain that would have felt? And how does this feel in our own lives? Sometimes, oftentimes in my experience, we have to come to the shoreline. The beauty is when we learn to meet the waters with expectation of what will happen next, as opposed to sheer terror. Again and again, Tricia's story showed that reality. Wow, what an inspiration. Hey, if you're looking for more support as you prepare for your own home birth journey, I'd love to invite you to explore Whole Mother Home Birth, where we focus on preparing your mind, body, heart, and home for a peaceful physiological birth. Would you be surprised to know that we do a whole lot of work on releasing fear? Podcast listeners get 10% off at checkout when they use the code podcast. Okay, my friends, what a beautiful story. That's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week.